Hi everyone, Tasha De Cruz here of Tasha De Cruz Nutrition. This is now day 3 of my 7-day series on the fourth trimester and maternal mental health. So on the first day we talked about, I just introduced the fourth trimester and talked about what it is, what it's about. Yesterday I talked about how honouring the fourth trimester really benefits your baby. So ways that you can make sure that your baby feels safe and secure during the fourth trimester, that transition from being in the womb to into the world outside. So today really I'm talking about how honouring the fourth trimester really benefits mum, and in particular from a mental health point of view. So this is really what I kind of really drive at when I talk about honouring the fourth trimester. So a couple of days ago I asked the question in one of my mum groups: if you could rewind time, what would you do differently during childbirth? And the answers I got were just phenomenal. I got a lot of responses, but there was a really common thread in there. So if I'm just going to read out a couple of highlights. So take pressure off myself. Don't push myself too much. Relax and chill out. Give myself time to just be. And a really common theme that came up over and over again was actually about limiting family visits, and I found that really interesting. Now, no one there actually mentioned the fourth trimester. No one actually said, I wish I had sort of made the most of that fourth trimester more. But I know what they mean. I know that what they were actually referring to was take that time that is needed during the fourth trimester to just relax, to just take the pressure off themselves. So that's why the first thing I'm going to say is take it easy. Now the hypnobirthing, I don't know actually if there's a hypnobirthing thing, but it's what my doula told me was take a week in bed, take a week on the bed, and take a week on the sofa before kind of trying to do anything more strenuous than that. Now I think that's maybe a bit extreme. I certainly got a bit cabin feverish. I did go out, I did leave the house, I got some lovely fresh air. But I would say if you generally aim to spend your first week after giving birth mostly lying in bed, probably with the curtains drawn, quite warm, find a really lovely dressing gown that you're quite happy to spend your time in. And then spend a week on the sofa. So again, just make your sofa your find a favourite sofa, find some really lovely cushions, something that can make you really, really comfortable so that you can spend your week sitting on the sofa, feeding your baby, and just relaxing. And then just aim to spend your third week mostly at home. So, yes, perhaps at this point you can start pottering around and doing more things, just kind of seeing more of the house, I suppose. But generally aim to be at home. Don't make plans to go out to do too much. Obviously, if you've got another child, especially a toddler, so quite commonly people have their second child when their first child is sort of a couple or 3 years old. Obviously, that does make things a lot harder. But if you can aim to do that, try and get as much support as you can from friends and family to allow you to spend a week in bed, a week on the sofa, and a week at home, largely. Having said that, I do actually think getting some fresh air is really, really important to for your mental health as well. So yeah, taking very, very gentle walks, completely depending on you and if that's actually what you feel like doing. And as I said, one of the really common themes that came up when I asked this question was about limiting family visits. So really, people often wish that they had either said no to their family or had said, no visitors for the first couple of days, or been a bit more careful about who came to see them. And it all obviously completely depends on you and your family. Now, could never have done that. My father flew over all the way from Malaysia to come and cook me my food. And my husband's mum, it's her first grandson, and she doesn't live in London, so she could only come down for a certain period of time after the birth. I did not feel that I wanted to say no to my son's grandparents, and that's why I say don't, some people say, don't let anyone come. I think that's really unfair. I think it really depends on you and your family and how you want to how you want your baby's first couple of weeks to be. So I always say to my clients, when they're pregnant, to really think about how do they want their first week. Do they want to have absolutely 0 visits whatsoever? And that's perfectly fine. Do they really want to limit it? So do they just want grandparents or just want their sisters or siblings to come and visit? But think about it and tell people, don't just assume that people are going to know whether or not you want them to visit. But what I do say is, when you do have people come and visit, please make use of them. So ask them if they can clean your house, if that's what you want. Come and cook your food. As I said, my dad turned up a couple of days after my son was born, having flown in from Malaysia, and he saw his role was to really cook my food for me, which was really, really wonderful, of course. Can they do some shopping for you? Can they, if you do have another older child, can they help take them to school or play with them or do whatever it is that you need to take the time with your new baby? So that's my first thing, really, is to take it easy. Allow yourself to take this time out. It doesn't matter what the house looks like. It doesn't matter what your clothes washing situation is. What matters is taking the time out. My second thing is, if you are going to breastfeed, and as you know, I'm a huge advocate of breastfeeding, of course from the child's benefit point of view, but particularly from the mum's point of view. So from a mum's, especially maternal mental health point of view, breastfeeding actually lowers your risk of postnatal depression. And I was reading a research article that said that it lowers the risk of inflammation in the body. So it's an anti-inflammatory, and inflammation is part of the stress response, which increases your risk of postnatal depression. I just found that really fascinating. Also, research shows that breastfeeding mothers get a little bit more sleep than either mixed feeding or formula feeding mothers. It doesn't actually sound like very much. It's actually only 20 to 30 minutes on average extra sleep that breastfeeding mothers get. But actually, what the research showed was that their reports for how they felt in terms of energy and in terms of resilience after a night's sleep breastfeeding was that they had more energy and greater resilience. So it might not seem like very much extra sleep, but the actual outcome and how they felt was had a huge benefit. And of course, we know that rest and sleep has a very, very important part to play in your mental health and reducing the risk of depression. And then obviously taking the time out during the 4th trimester has a really important role to play with your bonding with your baby. Now, obviously I covered that quite a lot yesterday, but it really does take time to get to know your baby. It takes time to learn their cues for hunger and feed. And I would actually say when I came out of the 4th trimester with my son after the first 3 months, I suddenly realised that was my turning point. Was I realised that I could actually understand what he was trying to tell me when he was crying. Suddenly his cries sounded different to me, whether it was hunger, whether it was tired, whether it was boredom, whether it was whatever, all the different cries that he had. And my son is now 8 months old. When I look back on those first few weeks after he was born, I actually realised that he was a stranger. I used to say to him over and over again, "Who are you? And who am I?" It was like I had to remind myself that he was my baby, he was my son, and I was his mother. Who are you and who am I? I'm your mother, you're my baby. And I obviously I knew him. He'd been part of me for 9 months, but he was also a completely new being. He was a stranger, and it took me that long to actually really understand who he was and my role for him as mother. So the big benefit of taking the time out to really honour that fourth trimester is allowing you to have the focus on yourself, your recovery, your healing after going through childbirth, and focus on your baby. Now, traditions around the world really honour this. You know, sometimes it's only for a month, sometimes it's for 3 months, whatever. But the point is that there are traditional cultures all around the world that place huge importance on honouring the period after childbirth. And really the main focus is on nourishing the mother and allowing them time, so taking the time out from housework, from cooking, from looking after the family, to bond with their baby. I've actually written a blog post about this. My website has been down the last couple of days, but I understand that it's back up. So I've written a blog post about the best foods you can eat to help yourself heal after giving birth. So I'll post the link to that under this after this live, and that might help just give you some ideas about how to nourish yourself during that fourth trimester. I hope that was helpful. Tomorrow is day 4 on the 7 days of lives about Facebook lives about the fourth trimester and its benefits for maternal mental health. Tomorrow I'm going to actually be coming at it from a slightly different angle and talking about the common concerns that mothers have or parents have, questions that come up over and over again in those first 3 months of baby's life. So I'm not an expert on sleep and I'm not an expert on breastfeeding, but I have observed similar questions that come up over and over again that mostly I feel can be answered by understanding where your baby's coming from during the fourth trimester. So tune in tomorrow, same time, 9 o'clock, for another live covering the fourth trimester and maternal mental health. Speak to you then. Bye bye.